My name is Gemma Ashford. I'm 31 years old and I run my own interior architecture firm. 12 employees, clients across 3 states, and a reputation I built from nothing, one unreturned phone call at a time. None of that mattered the night my stepbrother looked me straight across my mother's dining table and told me I wasn't going to be in his wedding. We kept the wedding party tight, he said, just blood family, you understand. I looked at my mother, she studied her wine glass. Before I tell you how that evening ended, and what the months after it finally taught me, let me ask you something, first. Have you ever spent your whole life working to earn a place in a family that had already decided you didn't quite fit? Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight, because if you have, you already know exactly what I felt sitting at that table. I was 10 years old when my mother married my stepfather. She'd been a single parent since my father left when I was 3, and I had watched her carry every load: rent, groceries, school pickups, the slow indignity of budgeting on a teacher's salary, without complaint for 7 years. When she brought my stepfather home and told me he came with a son, I decided I would make it work. I was a kid who wanted nothing more than a complete, steady family. I thought the universe owed us one. My stepbrother was 12. He had our stepfather's dark eyes and a way of sizing you up that he never quite lost as he got older. He wasn't cruel, not at first. He was just 12, and I was the intruder in a house he'd had to himself since his own mother left years before. I understood that, intellectually. Kids can understand a lot of things without those things hurting any less. For a while we were cordial. We watched the same Saturday morning cartoons. We argued over the last of the orange juice. My stepfather coached his baseball games and attended his science fairs. And when I won a regional art competition at 13 and came home with a ribbon, my stepfather said, "That's nice, honey," and turned back to the replay footage from my stepbrother's last game. I told myself it was just the rhythm of things settling, that it would even out. It didn't, but I got better at not noticing, or pretending not to. I was a focused student, the kind who stayed in on Friday nights to finish projects nobody had assigned yet. I graduated high school with honors. I put myself through college on scholarships and waitressing shifts that left me perpetually smelling of industrial kitchen greases. I got my architecture license at 26. I opened my own firm at 28 with a business loan, 1 client, and a sublet office the size of a walk-in closet. My stepbrother had a smoother path. My stepfather covered his tuition. Family investment, he called it. When my stepbrother graduated and launched a landscaping business that folded within the year, my stepfather absorbed the losses without comment. When my stepbrother tried a home renovation contracting outfit 2 years later and it stalled, my stepfather helped again. When that dissolved too, there was a quiet conversation, some shuffled finances, and life moved on. I was not bitter about this, or I told myself I wasn't. I had made my own way. I didn't need handouts. What I did feel, late at night when I was too tired to maintain the story I told myself, was a quiet, persistent ache. The ache of feeling like a guest in your own home. The ache of noticing that your contributions only counted when they were invisible. Over the years, as my firm grew and my stepfather's flooring business ran into the kind of slow decline that comes from ignoring a changing market for too long, I started quietly helping. Not because anyone asked outright, because they were my family, and I thought that was what family meant. The first time was the year my stepfather lost a contract that had been keeping the flooring business afloat. My mother mentioned, almost in passing, during a Sunday phone call, that they were behind on the mortgage. 2 payments. I transferred the money that afternoon and told her not to make a big deal of it. That became a pattern. 2 mortgage payments turned into 14 over the next 2 years. $38,000, total, moved quietly out of my account and into theirs. I kept a spreadsheet in a folder on my desktop labeled family, and I tried not to open it too often. When my stepbrother needed to refinance his student loans, the interest had ballooned to something he could no longer manage. I lent him $42,000. We had a conversation about repayment terms. I had my attorney draft a straightforward agreement, more for clarity than expectation. He signed it and made 2 payments in the first 6 months, and then nothing after that, for 3 years. When my mother and stepfather decided to renovate their house, I handled the design and project management myself. I absorbed what would have been a $65,000 consulting fee and called it a gift, because my mother's face, when we walked through the finished kitchen, made something in me feel, briefly, like I had done something exactly right. There were smaller things too. The rehearsal dinner for my stepbrother's engagement party, which I organized and mostly paid for when my stepfather's credit card hit its limit. The weekend my stepfather was hospitalized, and the insurance gap turned out to be larger than anyone expected. Each of those things felt, in the moment, like what you do for people you love. Piece by piece, the number climbed past $170,000. I did not tell anyone. Not my closest friend from work, Lottie, who probably sensed something was off from the number of times I quietly redirected our conversations away from the subject of family. Not my therapist, whom I saw twice a year and still hadn't given the full accounting. I did not tell anyone because telling someone would have made it real, and making it real would have forced me to look honestly at what I was buying with all that money. Not love. Not belonging. Just the continued, renewable hope of it. When my stepbrother called last October to say he was getting married, to a woman named Fiona, whom I had met exactly twice, and who had assessed me both times with an expression I couldn't quite name, I felt genuinely glad for him. I also made the mistake of feeling hopeful. He mentioned, toward the end of the call, that they were having a small cash flow problem with the venue deposit. $12,000. He'd pay me back well before the wedding. I wired it the next day. 3 weeks later, my mother invited me to dinner. I arrived with wine and the lemon bars I had been bringing to family gatherings since I was 15. My stepbrother was already there. Fiona sat beside him with her hand resting on his arm. My stepfather was at the head of the table with his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, the way he always sat when he was working hard to look relaxed. Dinner was unremarkable until it wasn't. I brought up the wedding the way you do when it's 4 months out and everyone at the table is connected to it. I was thinking I'd fly in a couple of days early, I said, in case there's any setup help needed. I know the venue is in Asheville. There was a pause that lasted about 1 second too long. My stepbrother glanced at Fiona. She glanced back. It was the kind of 2-second exchange that holds an entire conversation you weren't invited to. About that, my stepbrother said. We kept the wedding party tight. Blood family only. He cleared his throat, you understand. I heard the words clearly. They landed like something dropped into still water. Perfectly clean entry. Ripples moving outward in all directions. I looked at my mother. She was looking at her wine glass. I'm sorry, I said carefully. Are you saying I'm not in the wedding party? The bridesmaids are Fiona's sisters and my cousins, he said. We didn't want the sides to feel uneven. Uneven, I repeated. Fiona spoke then in the soft measured voice of someone who had rehearsed this. We just wanted to keep it intimate. Family. Real family, you know? I hope you understand it isn't personal. My stepfather cleared his throat. It's their day, he said. They get to decide what makes sense for them. I looked around the table once more. My mother's knuckles were pale around the stem of her glass. No one said anything else. I took a slow breath. I put my fork down with the quiet precision of someone making sure their hands stay still. Of course, I said. It's your wedding. Whatever works best for you. I stayed another 20 minutes. Long enough that leaving wouldn't look like fleeing. Then mentioned an early call in the morning, thanked my mother for dinner, and let myself out. My mother walked me to the door. She said my name once, in a tone that was the beginning of something she didn't finish. I told her I was fine. I drove home on autopilot. I made it through the front door, set my bag on the floor, and sat down in my kitchen with my back against the cabinets and my legs stretched out on the tile. Real family. Fiona's sisters and his cousins. I had paid for the venue where they were going to celebrate that real family. I had apparently done my job. The next 2 days I worked. I am good at compartmentalizing when there is work to do, and there was always work. But by day 3, Lottie came into my office and closed the door and sat with the look she reserves for moments that require actual honesty. You're doing the thing, she said. What thing? Where you go very efficient and very quiet, and your eyes look focused on something 12 feet past the wall. I told her. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then, please tell me you are not still on the hook for that venue deposit. The contract is in my name, I said. I put it on my card. Call them, she said, today, right now. I didn't call them right then. I opened my laptop instead and pulled up the spreadsheet. The one I almost never looked at. I went through every line, the mortgage payments, my stepbrother's loans, the design work, the smaller things. I added the $12,000 for the venue. $174,000. I sat with that number for a long time. On the 4th night after the dinner, my phone buzzed. A text from my stepbrother. Hey, caterer needs the second deposit by Friday, $9,500. Can you cover it and we'll settle up after the honeymoon? I read it twice, then a third time. Something settled in me then. Not anger exactly. Something quieter and more final. The feeling of a door closing on a draft that had been making you cold for years without you ever quite naming the cold as the problem. I scrolled back through my messages with my stepbrother, until I found the conversation from 3 weeks earlier, where he'd told me the wedding party was blood family only. I took a screenshot. Then I opened his new message and typed. Thought the rule was real family only. Might want to check with one of your actual relatives. I'm sure someone can cover it. I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter and poured a glass of water. My phone started ringing 11 minutes later. I didn't pick up. By morning I had 8 missed calls across 3 different numbers. The texts went from confused to firm to the variety people write when they have already decided you are the villain of a story they finished without you. My stepbrother's last voicemail. After everything this family has done for you, you're going to throw a fit over a wedding party? Grow up and call me back. Everything this family has done for me. I called the venue the following morning and spoke with their events coordinator. The deposit, $12,000, was in my name, charged to my card. I explained there had been a change in circumstances and asked about their refund policy. By the end of the call, I had set in motion the return of that deposit. I thanked her and hung up. Then I opened my laptop and started writing. It was not a short email. I took my time. Every loan, every payment, every absorbed fee, dates, amounts, notes, the signed agreement for my stepbrother's $42,000, with the outstanding balance and the payment history, which was 2 payments in 3 years followed by nothing. I noted that I was closing my end of these arrangements, and that outstanding balances were due within 30 days, as specified in the documents, already in their possession. I closed with one paragraph. For more than 2 decades, I have tried in various ways to belong to this family. I have contributed what I could, covered what I was able, and said nothing about most of it because I believed that was what love looked like. Being useful without requiring acknowledgement. I understand now that what I was actually doing was financing a sense of inclusion that was never genuinely on offer. I am simply aligning my choices with what was made clear to me at dinner last week. The bank is closed. I sent it to my stepbrother, my stepfather, and after a moment, my mother. The response came fast. My stepfather called 3 times in the first hour. My stepbrother sent a series of messages that escalated quickly. Fiona sent an email so carefully worded it took me 2 reads to identify it as a threat involving attorneys. I read all of it and responded to none of it. My mother sent one text, "Can we please talk?" I called her that evening. She picked up on the first ring. When she spoke, her voice had the careful quality of someone working very hard at something. "I should have said something at that table," she said. "Yes," I said, "you should have. I didn't know it would go that way, not exactly. But you knew the conversation was coming." Silence confirmed it. How long had they been planning it? "A few weeks," she said quietly. Fiona felt. She stopped, started again. It doesn't matter what Fiona felt. I should have stood up. What did she feel? My mother was quiet for a moment. She said she felt overshadowed at the engagement party, that people kept gravitating toward you. She wanted her wedding to be entirely about her. I sat with that. "She didn't want me in the wedding party," I said slowly, "because people talk to me at a party. I know how it sounds." And everyone agreed to go along with it. She didn't answer directly. She said, "The business has been struggling again. Your stepfather has been under enormous pressure." I kept telling myself I was keeping the peace. "Keeping the peace has a cost," I said. "I've been paying it." She said she was sorry. Not the kind of sorry that is performing remorse to get something back. The kind that sounds like it costs something to say. I told her I loved her and that I needed time. She said she understood, and that she would be there when I was ready. 2 days later there were 3 sharp knocks at my apartment door. My stepfather, my stepbrother, and my stepbrother's best man, who had apparently been asked to serve as backup. I let them in. I stayed standing. My stepfather opened with measured firmness. "You're blowing this entirely out of proportion," he said. The wedding party decision had logistical reasons behind it. It was not a personal statement. "It was planned for weeks," I said, "and it was delivered at a dinner table in front of everyone. If it wasn't personal, it was remarkably committed for something impersonal." My stepbrother cut in. "The venue situation is creating a real problem. The caterer, the florist, everything is now in question. We need to know what you're doing." "The deposit is being refunded to my account," I said. "You're welcome to rebook under your own card." Something behind his eyes shifted. "You're torpedoing our wedding over a bridesmaid slot." I handed him a printed copy of the email I'd sent. He looked at it for a long moment. "Some of this isn't accurate," he said. "The loan, we made payments." 2 payments, I said. "In the first 6 months, then nothing for 3 years. I have the records." The best man mentioned lawyers. I told him my attorney had drafted all the agreements, and would be glad to discuss enforcement at his convenience. My stepfather looked at me, with an expression I recognized from one other moment. The day the bank called about the flooring business. The expression of a man who has run through all his other options. "You don't understand the pressure we're under," he said. "The business, bills. We've relied on your help, because we've been barely holding on. Without your support, we could lose the house." "I know," I said. "I have every line item. I've understood the pressure for years. What I didn't understand was that you'd also decided I wasn't real family. I'm done holding both of those things at the same time." "What do you even want from us?" my stepbrother said. "An actual apology," I said. "Not a negotiating tactic, an acknowledgement of what happened at that dinner." He thought about it. "I'm sorry you felt excluded," he said. "That's not what I asked for." "I don't know what else you want." "I know," I said. "That's exactly the problem." I asked them to leave. When no one moved, I called the front desk and asked the concierge to come up. They were gone before he arrived. My stepfather turned at the door. His voice had dropped to something quieter and more tired than it had been all evening. "You're ending a family over one comment." "You made that comment after weeks of planning it," I said. And everyone at the table agreed with it. "I'm not ending anything. I'm just finally taking you at your word." That night my phone filled with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Cousins, my stepfather's sister, friends of my stepbrother, who had clearly been given a version of events starring me as a volatile woman, sabotaging a marriage over a petty slight. I wrote one reply, sent it to every thread, and attached the email with the full documentation. I contributed more than $174,000 to this family over the past decade. I was told last month that I am not real family and therefore not part of the wedding. I am aligning my financial involvement with that position. I want nothing other than to be treated with the same honesty that I extended to all of you. I turned my phone off. I ran a bath and stayed in it until the water went cold. It was the first time in weeks I had been completely still. The months after were quieter than I expected. There was a period of distance that had the specific texture of everyone waiting to see who flinched first. I did not flinch. I was too tired, and also, somewhere underneath the tiredness, I had arrived at something that felt, for the first time in a long time, like solid ground beneath me. Lottie was relentlessly practical about all of it, which was exactly what I needed. No excessive sympathy, no catastrophizing. Just logistics, the occasional glass of wine, and the regular reminder that I had built a good life and it was still there, intact, waiting for me to live in it again. My therapist, Dr. Osi, whom I started seeing weekly instead of twice a year, said something I keep returning to. You spent a long time trying to purchase certainty, she said. What you're learning is that certainty was never for sale. What's actually available is something better, clarity. The venue refund arrived 7 weeks after I made the call. $12,000, returned to my account. I noted it in my spreadsheet and didn't open that folder again for a long time. My mother called every week, careful, tentative, and genuine in a way I was slowly learning to receive. She told me, piece by piece, what was happening on her end. That the wedding had been moved to a smaller venue and pushed back. That my stepbrother had taken a job he wasn't excited about to cover the costs. That things were quieter in the house than they used to be. My stepfather made one payment toward the outstanding balances, $80. I noted it without comment. In February, my mother and I met for coffee. She arrived before me and was sitting with both hands around a mug when I walked in. She started before I'd even gotten my coat off. I spent years believing that keeping everyone comfortable was the same as keeping everyone together, she said. I made you pay for that confusion. And I am sorry, not because I need anything from you, but because it was wrong. I looked at her for a moment. I know you are, I said. I did not resume covering the business gaps. I did not step back in to smooth the wedding logistics, or lend another dollar toward whatever came next. But I quietly arranged for my mother's specialist appointments to continue, paid directly through her providers. Not because I had forgiven everyone, but because my mother was not everyone, and her health was not a bargaining chip in a dispute she had only partially caused. That spring I bought a small house outside the city. It has a back porch that gets good afternoon light and a kitchen with enough counter space that Lottie can actually cook when she comes over, which she does every other Sunday. In June I hosted a housewarming. 10 people. Not enough chairs, exactly the right amount of noise. 2 friends from college I had let myself lose touch with during the years when I was too busy performing stability to actually build any. A neighbor who turned out to share my taste in books. A woman from a professional network who has become one of the closest friends I have. People who showed up because they wanted to, not because of history or obligation or anything I had quietly paid for. We stayed past midnight. At some point I was standing on the porch with something cold in my hand, listening to the sound of people I had chosen and who had chosen me back, and I felt something I recognized, after a moment, as ease. Simple, uncomplicated ease. My stepbrother called once, in August. He circled whatever he wanted to say for a few minutes before arriving at it. I think we both said things. You told me I wasn't real family, I said. I said okay and acted accordingly. I'm honestly not sure what my part was. A pause. I just thought maybe we could put this behind us. I have put it behind me, I said, and meant it. But behind me doesn't mean forgotten, and it doesn't mean we go back to how things were. The door is open. It's just a different door than it used to be. He didn't seem to know what to do with that. We wrapped up the call politely, and I went back to whatever I had been doing. I don't think I have arrived at peace. Exactly. Peace sounds too finished. What I have is something more functional, a clearer sense of what I will extend to people and what I won't, and a much firmer knowledge that those limits are mine to set and do not require anyone's approval to be valid. I spent a long time believing that if I contributed enough, money, presence, patience, the quiet absorption of countless small indignities, I would eventually earn my way to the center of something. I know now that belonging doesn't work that way. It is not a purchase. It is not even an achievement. It either exists between people or it doesn't, and no amount of silent subsidy changes which one is true. If you are listening to this and you recognize the math I was doing, the invisible tally of what you've given and what hasn't come back, the sustained hope that the ledger would eventually balance itself. I want to say this to you directly, it won't balance itself. Not because people are irredeemably selfish, but because no one can repay you for love they didn't know you were offering as love. The only move that actually changes anything is the one where you stop making deposits into accounts that were never in your name. Setting that boundary wasn't selfish, it was necessary, and walking away from the version of yourself that kept shrinking to fit a space that was never going to expand. That is not an ending. That is the first thing that actually belongs to you. If this story landed somewhere true for you, I'd really like to hear about it. Have you ever had to pull back, financially, emotionally, both, from someone you cared about? What finally made the pattern clear enough to act on? I read every single comment, and wherever you are tonight, and whatever you are carrying, you are not alone in it.